Shalom, and welcome to our second episode looking at the promises and prophecies concerning Messiah's birth. Last time we addressed the question of who Messiah had to be, the King of Israel, and how that required a specific, certain ancestry, which indeed Jesus had. So now we're going to look at our second question. Where did Messiah have to be born? So returning to the Gospel of Matthew, we read, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." Now when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Now they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judea. For from you shall come a ruler who shall shepherd my people Israel." It's Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 6. Now, as we read this passage, it raises several important questions, such as, who are these wise men? Literally, it's magi. How did they know anything about the birth of a Jewish king? How did they know that the star was anything to do with him? And why had they traveled all that distance from the east to worship him? But also, how come they didn't know to go to Bethlehem of Judea instead of Jerusalem? So, firstly, who are these magi? Well, when we look back through the Old Testament, we find them mentioned in the book of Daniel, where we see that part of their profession was to interpret dreams and signs. Now, one way they did this was by studying the stars. And we also know from Daniel chapter 2, verse 48, that Daniel became the head of this Babylonian school of astrology. Now, that wasn't because he practiced astrology. Being a Jew loyal to the Mosaic law, he would not dabble in astrology. He became the head only because of the lack of spirituality and insight of King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had noticed some unique abilities that Daniel had, and he'd assumed that Daniel was therefore a superior astrologer and had made him head of the whole Babylonian school of astrology. But you see, Daniel never received any revelation from the stars, only from the creator of the stars, the God of Daniel. So, how did Magi, who were Gentiles, know anything about a Messianic king? Well, because the book of Daniel wasn't written in Israel, it was actually written in Babylon, where these Magi were. And in fact, half of the book of Daniel is not even written in Hebrew, the language of the Jewish people, but rather it's written in Aramaic, which is the language of the Babylonians. So this means they had access to his book of prophecies. And in there, he gives a specific timeline for the arrival of the Messiah, which is found in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. Now add to that, Daniel had saved the lives of all the wise men of Babylon, because when they could not interpret the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, he had sentenced them all to be executed. We see this in Daniel chapter 2, verse 12. Of course, among the ones who were sent to be arrested and executed was Daniel. So he asked for an audience with the king, and he interpreted the king's dream. And by so doing, he saved the lives of all the others. Now, this no doubt had a big influence on the Magi and resulted in many of them turning away from worshipping the stars and beginning to also worship the creator of the stars, the God of Israel. So they had in their possession a book written by their former head, Daniel, giving a timeline for the first coming. So when they saw the star, this new light up in the heavens, and the timing was right, that took that to be the sign that the king had been born. Now, while we know Daniel did give this timeline for the first coming, he doesn't actually make any connection with the coming to the concept of the star. So how did they know the star was related to the coming of Messiah? Well, actually, there is another Babylonian connection, and it's found in the book of Numbers in chapters 22 to 24, and it's the story of Balaam. Now, Balaam's reputation was whoever Balaam blesses will be blessed, and whoever he curses will be cursed. Now, because of his reputation, the king of Moab hired Balaam to curse the Jews, and 4 times he went up onto a high mountain, and he looked down on the Jewish people encamped below, and 4 times he opened his mouth to curse them, but all 4 times God took over his tongue, and he ended up blessing the Jewish people instead. Now, in these 4 blessings, he issues several Messianic prophecies, including one in Numbers chapter 24, verse 17. A star shall arise out of Jacob, to whom the scepter of kingship will be given. You see, it was Balaam who connected the Messiah with a star and kingship. And so as a result, you have both the star connection and the kingship connection. Now, by profession, Balaam was also an astrologer. And twice we are told in Scripture he also came from Babylonia, in Numbers chapter 22 verse 5 and Deuteronomy 23 verse 4. So from the Balaam connection, they knew that a star would be the sign of his coming, and from the Daniel connection, they knew when to expect him. So when they saw the light in the heavens, they took that to be the sign, and they went to head off to Israel. But this still leaves that last question. Why did they go to Jerusalem and not Bethlehem? Well, the historical context shows that while they had knowledge of the book of Daniel, they never had knowledge of the book of Micah. Why? Well, because the book of Micah was written after Israel had been taken into captivity in Babylon, and it was written back in the land of Israel in Hebrew. And so the Magi never had access to this book. So when Micah chapter 2 verse 5 verse 2 prophesies that Bethlehem, not Jerusalem, would be the place of his birth, they didn't know this. For them, the logical place for the Messiah to be born would be the Jewish capital. And that was, of course, Jerusalem, not Bethlehem. And to Jerusalem they came, stirring a great stir, a stir that reached the ears of Herod the Great. Now, as a quick aside, between 135 AD and 1947, there was no Bethlehem in Judea, as Judea as a region ceased to exist following the failed Bar Kokhba revolt, and it was renamed and merged with Roman Syria to form Syria Palestina. It later became under Muslim control. It was under Israeli control between 1947 to 1995, however the population consisted of Muslims and Arab Christians. So since 1995, Bethlehem has now been back under the control of the Palestinian National Authority, and no Jewish people currently reside there. So if you think of it, it's been impossible and continues to be impossible for a Jewish Messiah to have been born in Bethlehem of Judea for the past 1,884 years. So now let's look at our final question. Why did Messiah have to come? And the New Testament says this: the saying is trustworthy and deserving of full acceptance, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the foremost. 1 Timothy 1 verse 15. You know, at Christmas time we often look at what happens, such as the stars and the shepherds and the wise men. But you know, sometimes we fail to ask the question, why? Why did we need a Messiah to come? Well, this verse tells us that the primary purpose of the Son of God becoming the Son of Man was so that he could provide a divine solution to the human problem of sin. In fact, the very first Messianic prophecy follows straight after the fall, And it's set in the Garden of Eden. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Now, obviously, before the fall, no Messiah was needed. But now, after sin has entered the world, God gives a glimpse of his future plan of redemption. He would be a man, born of a woman. But his birth would prove that he was divine, because it says seed of the woman, not seed of the man. Isaiah would later expand on this with his prophecy. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. Emmanuel literally means God with us. So with other religions, what you find when you look closely enough is that it is all about us trying to fix ourselves. Us trying to obtain to a divine standard. Looking to ourselves for the answer. And this is a clear distinctive of the message of the Bible. It states we can't save ourselves. We can't reach God's perfect standard. That, in fact, is impossible. So instead we find it shares about how God reached out to us. Even while we were weak, sinful, and his enemies, he showed his love for us. How? By sending his Son to provide a way of life and hope, that whoever believes in Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of the living God, will have everlasting life. To add to that, he offers this as a free gift of his grace to each of us individually. And all we need to do is respond in faith. But hopefully, as you have seen, this is not blind faith, but rather a faith based on the promises of God, found in the prophecies of the Old Testament. So the question remains, is Jesus your Messiah? Because there is real evidence to show that he is the promised Messiah of the Old Testament. And we've only looked at one particular set of prophecies, those relating to his birth. There are many other prophecies concerning his life, death, burial, and resurrection that were also fulfilled by Jesus at his first coming. So this does not require blind faith, but it does require a response of faith. So the real message that we should get at Christmas is not about our gifts for each other, but God's gift to us, the greatest gift of all, God's Son. And the question is, will you accept God's gift? If Jesus is your Messiah, then the fact that God fulfilled all of these prophecies so precisely concerning Jesus' first coming means we can have complete confidence that he will also fulfill any prophecies yet to be fulfilled concerning Messiah's second coming. As Paul puts it, for whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. Romans 15 verse 4. Well, this concludes part 1 in our series, The Promised Messiah, which has been looking at the promises and prophecies relating to his birth. I hope you can join us next time as we start part 2. Now, if you have enjoyed some of these insights of this series, I would highly recommend the book, Yeshua, The Life of Messiah from a Messianic Perspective, the abridged version written by Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum.